evening, ladies and gentlemen. If everyone would like to take a seat, we will get our evening underway. Thank you so much for everyone taking your time on a Monday evening at the beginning of the work week to spend a little bit of extra time with us to have this important discussion tonight. My name is Tamara Paulzine, and I am the chair of Carver County DFL. I am really excited to kick us off this evening. Before we get going, I know right at the door there were a couple of different options for you to share your story or your hope for our legislators or our candidates who are going to be legislators, writing them a note as to why this topic is important to you. You can write your notes, stick it in the basket out there. We're going to be hanging them in the DFL office uptown. Just a reminder, as all of our volunteers come through and our candidates come through, everyone that comes through, that they can see that and remind themselves why we're doing the work we are doing, how important this is. So if you have time later on, if you do not get this, please do so at the end of the night. I'm going to kick it off, though, to Joe Brothers. Joe Brothers is our 48A candidate that is taking on Jim Nash this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joe Brothers. I'm running for Minnesota House, and I'm going to talk about the trends and the data on gun violence in Minnesota. A couple things on the slide up here. Minnesota's doing really well, right? We're 8th lowest in the country in gun deaths, but we're not the lowest. And we also are seeing an increase in gun deaths over the last 10 years. Public safety and public health is a gun violence issue, or gun violence is a public health and public safety issue. This chart here is about the trends by age. I'll go through a little bit. If you look at the 2024 timeline, the top one is an age bracket 26 to 44. You see that line, it's strict or a high increase from 2014 to 2024. The next line down is 45 to 64. That's also an increase. Next line below that is 65 plus. That also has a significant increase from 2014 to 2024. I'm showing this slide just to show you that there has been an increase in the rate and in the number of gun deaths from 2014 to 2024. This is gun death rates by category. Top is, the line in blue is the top. It is total gun deaths from 2013 to 2023. The line below that is orange, and that is gun death by suicide. And you see that fluctuates up and down. There's a few increases from 2015 through 2017, and also again from 2020 to 2022. That amount, or the rate of gun deaths by suicide, is about 3 times the rate of gun deaths by homicide. Gun deaths by homicide, you can see, also is slightly increasing. Biggest increases from 2018 to 2022. 2021, apologize. Slight decrease from 2021 to 2023. Okay, this will all play in a little bit later. In 2024, there were 582 Minnesotans that died by gun death or by gun violence. 406, or 72% of them, were suicide. 148, or 28%, were homicides. If you look at the map, it shows you that all of Minnesota is impacted by gun violence, especially areas in greater Minnesota. This is suicide, strictly suicide. Notice the map doesn't change much. Majority of gun deaths due to suicide are white males, older than 44 years old in greater Minnesota. Males are 10 times more likely to die by gun suicide than females. White males over the age of 34 account for 23% of the population, but 65% of gun deaths due to suicide. And 44% of all gun suicide deaths in 2023 were over the age of 54, 54. This is homicide, right? This is a chart on homicide gun deaths. If you notice, it's a little bit different. More concentrated in the metro urban areas. Typically, young black males are disproportionately impacted by gun homicide deaths. 4 times more males are 4 times more impacted than females, Black people are 26 times more impacted by gun homicide than their white counterparts. Young black males, 15 to 34, make up 1.2% of the population, but 44% of gun homicide deaths in 2023. And American Indian, Alaskan Native people were 17 times as likely to die by gun homicide as their white counterparts in 2023. The first three bullets were already previously mentioned. I'm going to talk about last three. Firearms are used in the majority of homicides. In 2022, 41% of all domestic violence homicides, were gun-related. Firearms are the fourth leading cause of death among children, 17 and under, in 2023. The last two here, I'm going to leave you with these. An average of one person is killed every 17 hours. Gun violence cost Minnesotans $6 billion annually. To put that in perspective, all of the fraud that's happened in Minnesota since 2018 is projected to be $9 billion. Minnesotans, or I should say gun violence, costs Minnesotans $6 billion annually. That's every year. All the sources that were used for this slide are here, and I'm going to hand it over to the Minnesota DFL Party Chair, Richard Carboom.
Thank you, Joe, for grounding us with that data. It's really, it's a lot to take in. My name is Richard Carboom, and I'm the chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. It's great to be here in Chaska tonight. We're here to listen, and we're here to exchange information. This is what it means to meet voters where they're at and then talk about the issues that voters want you to be focused on. 9 months ago, we had the Annunciation Church and School shooting. A few months before that, we lost Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman through assassination with gun violence. And obviously Alex Preddy and Renee Good should be alive today, but they died in the streets of Minneapolis. This gun violence is unacceptable, and it's up to us to do something about it. Today is the last day of the legislative session, and Speaker Lisa Damith promised the Annunciation families that she would get a vote on the gun violence package that they were supporting. She promised them that. When the Senate sent her the bill that she had promised to vote on, she put it in a drawer and refused to take it out, up until midnight last night when they could no longer take action on it. She is the candidate, the Republican candidate for governor in Minnesota, and we're going to hold her accountable each and every day between now and November for putting that bill in a drawer. There's a fantastic panel of experts here to share information with the community tonight. It is my great honor to introduce the moderator of the panel. We have a fantastic candidate running in the 6th Congressional District against Tom Emmer. He's going to unseat Tom Emmer in November of this year. Doug has been working on this campaign for over 400 days, and he has done the work to listen to voters. That's why he does town hall meetings just like this. He's going to do several more this week and several more at the beginning of June. He's committed to meeting voters where they're at and listening to voters in their communities, because we have a representative in the 6th District, in Tom Emmer, who's abandoned the 6th District completely. He's abandoned Minnesota, and he only does what Trump wants him to do. He's not doing what Minnesotans need him to do. And so please help me welcome Doug Chapin, who's going to beat Tom Emmer this November.
Good evening, everybody. As Richard says, my name is Doug Chapin. I am running against Tom Emmer in the 6th Congressional District. Wanted to bring everybody here tonight because one thing I believe very strongly in my campaign, not as a Democrat, but as a Minnesotan, as an American, that is our job as public servants to actually find solutions to the problems that confront us. And unfortunately, the problem of gun violence and gun rights and public safety has become one which has divided us as a nation, as a state, as a community. We have reached the point where we can no longer afford to do nothing. We have seen what happens when nothing happens. We have seen the partisan divide. We have seen the toll in human life. We have seen the toll economically. I am committed in this campaign and in our work going forward to finding a way forward on all the issues that matter to Minnesotans and the people of the 6th District, but especially on the issue of gun policy and gun rights and gun violence. And so I'm delighted to be joined tonight by an amazing panel of experts. I'm going to call them up one at a time as I can see them. I see Dr. Chris Subramanian. I'm sorry, Subramanian? Subramanian, sorry. Dr. Subramanian. I promise I had it right in the warm-up. I really do apologize. If you want to call me Mr. Chapin, that's fine. Dr. Subramanian is currently a candidate for Minnesota Senate in District 49, but more importantly, he is a pediatrician. He works at the Hennepin County Medical Center. He has seen firsthand the toll that guns can take, and we're delighted to have him here today with a caregiver's perspective. Also want to bring up Tess Rada, who is an Annunciation parent who I have met on several occasions discussing this issue. Unfortunately, I think that the Annunciation parents need no introduction. They've already been through quite a lot. We talked before the event tonight about the impact it has had on her daughter. But unfortunately, the Annunciation parents are once again front and center because of the promise that was apparently made and apparently broken by the speaker. But we're very happy to have Tess here tonight to talk about what gun violence looks like from the perspective of someone who has suffered it directly. Next, I want to invite up my friend and colleague, Dr. Dan Kessler, who is our candidate in 48A. Dan is a psychologist with a wide range of practice, but one which focuses a lot on the challenge that people face and the role that mental health can play in both preventing and exacerbating gun violence. And so we're delighted to have him here tonight. And then finally, last but not least, we have Lisa Vermelt from Maria's Voice. Maria's Voice is an organization, she'll tell you more about it, that is dedicated to speaking out for and with victims of domestic violence. She has her own story to share. Like Tess, she has direct experience with the consequences of gun violence, and in my experience has always been someone who's very thoughtful about what can be done to prevent it and what needs to be done to make sure that it doesn't continue. So I have talked enough. Thank you. So I'm going to get out of the way here for just a minute. I'm going to let everyone, starting with Krish, just give us 2 to 3 minutes in addition to what I've said, why you're here, what you're hoping to accomplish tonight, and any questions that you're hoping that we answer.
Thanks so much. Can you guys hear me? Test, test, test.
Can you hear me now? Here we go.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I am a pediatrician, and one of the things that we learn about in trauma, and there's no doubt that our community has been through trauma. Doug and Richard referenced some of the events, but we know that this community has gone through so much over the last few years. One of the things that I've learned in trauma is that relationships are healing. And when I look and see that on a Monday night, this many people came out because of an issue like this, to build community, to think about this critical issue, that's the kind of relationships that I think it takes to heal. And so thank you all so much for being here. My name is Dr. Krish Subramanian. I'm a former special education teacher who turned into a pediatrician. And on August 27th at 8:52 a.m., I got a page on this phone right here. And it said 3 words you never want to see: pediatric mass casualty. it stopped me cold. It scared me. It made me wonder, is this a drill? And of course, it was not a drill. I have also, unfortunately, seen too many incidents outside of Annunciation in which the great potential, the great hope of young people has been mitigated, cut down in senseless acts, in obscene minutes. But, you know, I'm here tonight because I really have been the beneficiary of the Minnesota dream, the American dream, and I've seen the ways that community has come together to heal. Communities much like the folks here tonight. I have seen the heroes, the nurses who ran into the hospital on that day, who weren't on shift, but who came in to take care of kids that day. I've seen the therapists and the chaplains who were there that day and every other day to support our young people who go through trauma. I've seen the Next Step program, which is a violence intervention program that aims to break cycles of violence. And I've seen in the last 9 months the incredible ways that community has come together, the way that parents have inspired us, the way that my colleagues have inspired us, and honestly, I've seen the way that kids inspire us with their incredible perseverance and their incredible vision towards what is possible. I thank you all so much for being here because I'm eager to learn too what we need to get done, and frankly, it's going to take all of us doing it, all of us pushing forward to get it done. Thank you all.
Hello, my name is Tess Rada. My daughter is a 3rd grader at Annunciation Catholic School. I just kind of want to tell you about my day that day and what happened. So it was the 3rd day of school, and it was the first all-school mass of the year, kind of like a back-to-school mass. Lila, my daughter, had forgotten her lunch that day, so her dad brought it to the school. And when he was in the parking lot, he heard 116 rounds going into the stained glass windows. He thought it was fireworks at first, and then he saw an elderly parishioner near him get shot in the leg, and that's when he realized what it was. He called me, and I raced to the school. I couldn't park anywhere near the school. I've never seen so many emergency vehicles in my life. And I found my daughter, but in that moment, I saw kids covered in blood, in their own blood, in their classmates' blood. I saw parents frantically searching for their kids, some who were never going to find their kids. We attended 2 classmates' funerals. One of them had been Lila's classmate since preschool. I had to tell her that he had died. And every day, we have to go back. We have to go back to the school, and they have to see where it happened. We have wonderful therapists. Every class has a therapist assigned to them. And they're wonderful, but they're busy because these kids flinch at any sound. And it's right in Minneapolis, so there's lots of sounds around. The last couple weeks with the thunderstorms have been pretty tough for my daughter. She doesn't sleep well when thunder is happening. She goes to therapy weekly, and she still has not been able to talk about that day. I learned later that the principal was in the sanctuary and held both kids who died's hands the entire time until emergency services got there. And then he came and spoke to the survivors and was very positive, and he did a press conference and said we need to move our feet. So that's what I've been trying to do. I want to, thank you. I don't say this because I want to tell you a sad story. I tell you it because I didn't think it would happen to me. And gun violence affects every walk of life. It does not matter who you voted for, what the color of your skin is. It can happen at any moment. And when gun violence happens, it is already too late. So we need prevention, we need intervention, and we need to move our feet. Thank you.
I'm Dan Kessler. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been in practice about 30 years. In my practice, my job is to listen, to hear people and their stories, and to help them heal in those moments. In moments like this one, I find myself overcome with my own emotion. The intense sadness at the loss of life, especially children's lives. The anger that our legislature can't get the votes necessary to act to protect our children. I have sat with family members after a loss due to suicide, after a loss due to homicide. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. And thank you as well for sharing your stories, and thank you, Lissa, for what you're going to share. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm Lissa Weimelt, and my husband Bill and I, who are Chaska residents, we founded Maria's Voice after the murder of our daughter Maria Pugh in her home by a domestic abuser. Maria's Voice is a public health model of prevention education. We are not a political organization, nor do we support any political party. We actually support safety in our homes. Our mission: we educate the public about the 12 common signs of domestic violence, so a person who chooses to abuse can be avoided, or help can be sought before violence increases, because in domestic violence, it always does. Maria was not murdered by a gun. However, many abusers use guns as a constant presence in their home to enforce control and threats. The link between guns and domestic violence grows and increases every year. We talk with many survivors who permit us to share their real life experiences, so I'm going to tell you just a couple. A woman told us that her spouse comes home from work and puts his gun on the counter every time he comes home. He plays around with it, kind of takes it and he spins it. And then he would casually mention that there's a bullet in that gun with her name on it. It terrified her and kept her a prisoner in a relationship of emotional abuse for years. A man told us that about 30 years ago, he was shot by his wife. That shame, his being an abused man, kept him from revealing this trauma to all family and friends. Hardly anyone knew. He has carried this secret burden of shame, like so many abused people do, because of the gun violence in his life. And last year, Maria's Voice honored the life of Lyle. Lyle's a 62-year-old grandfather who ran to help his neighbor who was being threatened in her home by her partner. Lyle, you know, just the helpful bystander next door, was shot and killed. So was Kinsey, a two-year-old, who was killed by a bullet when her dad attempted to shoot her mom. Guns are not used only to control and threaten in the home of an abuser, but they are routinely used to end the lives of our neighbors. So, you know, these stories really impact, these true, real life, real lived stories that I could tell you thousands of, impact every single one of us. Gun violence impacts every single person. The prevention of violence is humane. It is cost effective and should be one of the highest imperatives of anybody in city, state, or federal leadership. Right? Right. Thank you. To do nothing, to ignore the problem of guns, to purposely not take action in the face of this crisis is just really negligent. The extremes on both sides speak really, really loudly to cause confusion and inaction. The vast majority of us in the middle, folks, we need to get involved rationally and calmly to prevent gun violence and prevent domestic violence in support of a really basic human right. Safety in our homes and in our schools for every man, woman, and child. We can find common sense solutions, so let's get to work and do that.
Hopefully the microphone has found its home. Good. Well, good. So let's jump into the questions, and I want to thank everybody who registered and provided questions. Tried really hard to group them together into some topics that we can talk about tonight. The first one, Lissa mentioned the extremes. I think very often debates over gun violence and gun policy and gun rights end up in this very black and white debate of, am I allowed to have a gun, and what harm can a gun cause? And it ends up being a tug of war over a constitutional right rather than a discussion of the potential harm that firearms can cause. We know in this state that there are countless, thousands, maybe millions of responsible gun owners who would never commit the kinds of crimes that we've heard about tonight. But how, in each of your experience, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in on this first do so, how can we reframe this from a constitutional fight, from a political fight, to that public health lens, to that harm reduction that will allow us to see that this isn't about taking away the rights of somebody to have something, but protecting the right of somebody, a child, a spouse, a neighbor, an innocent bystander, simply to live?
I can take that, Doug, to start, if it's okay. Almost every day I'm doing some type of an assessment around suicidal thinking. And I'm asking the client, are you having thoughts about hurting yourself or killing yourself? And by the way, when we ask the question, we ask it directly like that. No tap dancing. Are you thinking about hurting yourself or killing yourself? If the answer is yes, and most people do answer that question honestly, if the answer is yes, we follow up with questions like, what kind of thoughts are you having? How serious are those thoughts? Are they active thoughts? Are they like... But one of the questions I always ask is, do you have access to firearms? The reason for that question is that an attempt of suicide by any other means other than a firearm, the person is likely to survive that about 49 out of 50 times, or even 99 out of 100 times, depending on whose data you look at. But when that suicide attempt is by firearm, they're almost always going to end up taking their own life. I asked them, is there a family member you're willing to pass your guns on to hold on, a friend, someone you trust? And believe it or not, in almost every case they say yes. And they pass that gun along. Now, we do have the ability for an extreme risk protection order, red flag in Minnesota, but those are actually fairly rarely necessary. The statement comes up a lot, well, if someone wants to end their life, if someone wants to commit an act of mass violence, won't they do it? They might. But what we know is that if we can reduce the availability of a firearm to someone who is thinking about taking their own life, if we can reduce the availability of a weapon of war, a large magazine, a firearm that can do tremendous damage, that person is far less likely to harm anyone, but especially not a lot of people. So where the suicide prevention and the reduction in impact of violence come together is around creating a safer environment. And that's what all of the laws that we're looking to, that were proposed really focused on. They didn't focus on taking away guns or gun rights. They focused on reducing the likelihood that someone who wanted to do grievous harm to self or others would have the ability to do that. I'm deeply disappointed that that law didn't pass.
So I think that we are looking, it has become so political in every way, and it's so almost silly to me because at Annunciation, we lost a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. Fletcher and Harper were real kids who wanted to be things when they grew up, who had friends. They were real kids. They could have been your kids. Nobody wants this to happen to their kid. And so if we can set aside the politicalness and just look at the fact that the shooter at our school, it was 2 minutes and it was 116 bullets. If that person didn't have the weapon that he had, that would not have been that devastating at all. And you have to think, and it's hard to think about, it's scary to think about, but if there was somebody who wanted to harm your kid at your school, would you want them to have an AR-style weapon? Because I think we can all agree, no. It does so much damage. And I don't believe that any one law is going to prevent this at all. But if it reduces it even a little, if it could have saved Harper or Fletcher, it would have been enough.
Actually, Krish, if I could, as a doctor, you obviously deal with the public health impacts of things on children specifically all the time. You know, smoking, auto safety, what have you. Is there any kind of helpful analog to what we've done in other threats to public safety, especially to children, that we could apply to the gun violence debate?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Doug. Can you all hear me? Good. Hello? All right. Yeah, you know, I spent a lot of years, and continue to spend a lot of years, learning how we keep kids safe. And much of our training is around how do you keep kids safe from RSV or biliary atresia or like bad diseases, right? And that's really, really important. But honestly, I spend most of my days talking with families about, to be honest, sleeping. How do you safe sleep? How do you help kids potty train? We do a lot of talking about that. We talk about how do you keep kids safe from the chemicals and put them in a safe place and prevent them from accessing them so they don't get into chemicals that they shouldn't. So much of our training is about these items, and yet we just don't do as much when it comes to gun violence. Yet the #1 cause of deaths in children in this country, gun violence. Guns, more than RSV, more than cardiac issues, more than biliary atresia, it's guns. And so I you know, in my general approach, I said, all right, what can we as pediatricians, as a healthcare community, do about such a situation? We know that there is an epidemic. We know that the #1 killer of young people in this country is guns. So let's take a scientific approach to it. What does the data say in terms of what we should do? And I think that's how we should approach most problems, is what does the science say of how do we improve this problem? And so if you do a open evidence search or a Cochrane review study of gun violence prevention, lo and behold, there are ideas and data to suggest what we can do. #1, this is something that Dan referenced. Keep guns away from people in crisis. You know, red flag prevention orders. For every 17 red flag prevention orders placed, 1 life is saved. That is a remarkable intervention, right? 1 out of every 5 people, or just a 1 out of 17, 5%, just a remarkable intervention. Safe storage, evidence-based, data suggests it works. Safe storage. Permit to purchase, make sure you know who's buying guns. Child access prevention. That's something that we as pediatricians, healthcare providers can do at every visit, making sure that kids are separated from these dangerous tools. Domestic violence education and firearm registration. You know, I'm in the military. I am a veteran. And every year I have to sign a document that's a corollary to the Laudenberg Amendment, which says I have never participated in domestic violence or have no convictions of domestic violence. If that kind of prevention is good enough for the military, it should be good enough for everyone. The number 6 intervention that showed data to be effective is violence cycle disruption. So what I was talking about with Next Step, in certain communities that we treat at HCMC, stopping the cycles of violence, having peacemakers out there to squash conflict and violence and resolve conflict is instrumental. And I tell you, look up Next Step. These people do amazing work. And the last thing is making sure that we as healthcare providers ask and talk to patients about this issue. So there's 7 evidence-based things that I think very few people would find terribly controversial that we can do right now that will save lives.
And so what was in the bill that did not make it?
Go ahead.
No, there was money in the bill for school safety. There was money in the bill for mental health services for our school children. There was removal of the ability for large capacity magazines, 30-round magazines, and a ban on assault weapons. They were going to take out the exemption for sports use for assault style weapons. Those are the primary provisions. There are a few
red
other
flag law education was
yes,
a big one in there.
Yeah, because red flags laws were put in place in 23, but there needs to be more education around that. But about something you mentioned, corollary, Doug. One of the strong corollaries here, people often will say to me, well, automobiles kill people. Yes, about 350 deaths per year in Minnesota, fewer than guns, but automobiles. One of the biggest differences, and Dr. Chris, you really underlined this beautifully, years ago, when people were dying in cars in accidents that were relatively minor, we took action. We passed laws to make cars safer, and the reduction in deaths per mile driven is about 90% over the last 50 years because we put common sense laws in around car safety. We can do the same thing with guns that won't interfere with anyone's right and will make our country, our state, safer for our children.
So I just have a quick piggyback on that as well and want to follow up with a couple of things that Dr. Krish said. You know, we have a really amazing prevention model in the United States that's distributed by the CDC, right? So these are great folks who are science-based, who want to keep us safe in our homes, whether it's from guns or whether it's from domestic violence. And they publish a lot of information for how we do that, like how do we disrupt the cycle of violence in our homes from domestic violence? How can we do that with guns? So I think that we really need to look at how do we take very small steps to help the public understand in very easy to understand terms what it looks like to keep you safe. Not what does it look like to lock up your gun or take away your gun or don't let you go hunting or all these kind of silly things, but what does it look like to keep your home safe? And what are small, very inexpensive, very unlabor intensive things that you could do, like maybe put a trigger lock on your gun or put your gun in a gun safe. What are things that every person who owns a gun could do this? So I think we need to take out the, all this animosity toward each other around a solution and follow some expert advice that comes from the CDC. They helped us prevent heart attacks and strokes. We significantly decreased deaths because of how the CDC taught us to understand the signs of heart attack and stroke. We put kids in car seats. We took Tide Pods, out of sitting around so kids couldn't reach them. These are very sensible things. They're easy things. They're easy to do. They're not controversial. I think we've made things way too animosity related, so we have one person on one side of the aisle arguing with the other person on the other side of the aisle. And this keeps us from getting anything common sense done. That's a strategy to get nothing done. So I think if we followed the rules of the CDC, followed those wonderful things that Dr. Krish was outlining, we could start with really simple things every single American could do to keep their kids and their grandkids safe.
That's an excellent segue into the next question. So I think too often the gun debate boils down to a very simple, anyone should be able to have a gun, no one should be able to have a gun. We have that fight about all or nothing. In a world where there are responsible gun owners, where there are people who have guns for personal protection, for sport, for hunting, what have you, what are the kinds of things that we can do to encourage these kinds of behaviors that we're talking about? And the questions that came up tonight covered a whole bunch of these, and I really break them down into kind of two categories. One is a financial incentive or a disincentive, whether it's a higher registration fee or increased insurance requirements. One questioner talked about basically calculating the cost of gun violence and then levying a tax on gun purchases intended to capture that back, kind of like cigarette taxes and the like. The others are tied more to like legal liability and disincentives, whether it's, so we can talk about safe storage, we can talk about trigger locks, but then we talk about what happens when a gun is not stored safely or a gun in your home is used to commit gun violence. That's a big question with lots of pieces in it, but let me throw it out to the group. What in there does and doesn't work, setting aside the politics for the moment? Which of those things in your collective experience has a better or worse chance of having an impact on a responsible gun owner's behavior with regard to the firearms in their possession and care? Wow, it's a stumper.
Boy,
okay.
I sure wish I had a really good answer for that one. I think I have a broader answer and or a broader thought, is that we kind of have to work toward building a culture around consensus and a culture that really works on everybody's participation in keeping us all healthy and safe versus what's our payoff for not doing that. So, you saw all the statistics at the beginning, right? Those were just horrible. If that didn't change our mind, I don't know what would. But guess what? That doesn't. I think people need an incentive for consensus. I don't think taxes don't work for me. I could pay more, I could pay less. I don't really care. I really want something that leads to something more positive in a long-term outcome. So how do we kind of talk more about a cultural shift? How do we maybe have men talk about how they use guns and why they do, and convince other men to be responsible in their home? How do we get women to talk about the same thing? You know? So I'm looking at a broader shift. I'm not really looking at, how can I levy a tax? Maybe that's just me, I don't think that way. But I think where we're at, we have to really approach things very organically. How do we move toward a solution? Not how do we piss and moan about, gee, is it a 2% tax or a 3% tax? And pretty much at the end of the session, you've done nothing again. So I think we need to address problems way differently than how we're thinking about them.
I also, this is a broader answer, but I think that anybody who has lost somebody to gun violence knows that that is the highest cost. And I agree. I mean, it's hard to make people care about something if they don't care about it. But if you have experienced it, then you know. And what I know is that Sandy Hook, Uvalde, Parkland, they all used the same style weapon, and the cost of this weapon is way too high for us to keep using it. So I don't know about all of the taxes and everything like that, but I do know that this cannot happen anymore.
So let me take it away from taxes. Let's talk about things like safe storage. Let's talk about liability for unauthorized use. Different states have different rules, right? Some states, if a child gets access to a gun and harm results, there's liability. Sometimes if anyone gets access to a gun and harm results, there's liability. Again, I think a cultural shift is very important, but in the short term, what can we do to help nudge that culture along by giving people incentives or candidly disincentives for unsafe behavior that can result in the kinds of harms that you all are seeing? I mean, I hate to keep throwing it at you, Krish, but again, this feels like another kind of public health. What can we do? We don't let parents put kids in cars without car seats, mostly because it's a really bad idea, but also because you can incur liability. Are there ways to use incentives or disincentives to nudge people toward safer behavior or harm reductive behavior?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I think if any of us say we know what the incentive is that works, we're lying. Why? Because till not that long ago, it was actually illegal to use, it was restricted to use funding to do this type of research, from the CDC or the NIH. Luckily, in the last 10 years, some of those dollars have started to open up. But I think one of the problems that we have is that with regards to this topic, we may be asking the wrong question. And that's really important. All researchers will say the question is the battle. Right now, we're thinking about what is the policy. I think the question we need to ask people from across the political spectrum is, how do we keep, in my case, young people safer? How do we keep people safer? If you start with that question first and foremost, it doesn't hypothesize an answer. Now, I think I have a strong feeling on my answer. But I think it's really important. I think one of the questions you're asking is, how do we engage our community in this conversation? And it's important not to hypothesize the answer without real conversation. So I think it's really important for a moment to stop and say, I hear you that this is a tradition in your family. I hear you that this is very important to your way of life. we start there, and then we frame the question of how do we keep young people safe, knowing that that is a value of yours. How do we keep young people safe? And I suspect 4 or 5 of those things on the front list that I gave would be amenable to many, many people. And I think that's a place to start. Now, I have strong feelings about the AR-15, the binary trigger, the magazines greater than 17 or 18, which is what was in this legislation. I have strong feelings, but I do think if we start the conversation there, we may miss some opportunities to get some wins.
Yeah, I think you're all correct there. Changing culture is critical. And when we look to put children in car seats, we did tell parents it's important to put your child in a car seat. We explained why it's important. We set guidelines. But then we also passed laws. We passed laws that required car seats for children, because we know that many parents will say, this is a good idea. Okay, the recommendations until this age? Okay, great, I'll do that. I'll follow the recommendations. But we also know that there are parents who won't do that. And we need to pass laws in order to enforce some of what we know to be true. And it's the same thing for firearms. Most responsible gun owners will practice all of these safety things that we're talking about. They'll keep their guns locked up. They'll keep a trigger guard on it. They'll make sure that their guns are safe and not in the hands of someone who can do harm. But some won't. And we need to have the courage, and with apologies for politics, we need to have the courage to pass laws even if there is a lobby pushing a party to not pass those laws. Because that's what makes a difference. We know that even in suburban, exurban areas, we still have 75% of people want to see these laws passed. And that's Democrats, Republicans, both. This is not like, this is a partisan issue at the state capitol. But amongst people, Republicans and Democrats alike, this is not as nearly as partisan an issue as it is at our state capitol. And I sincerely hope that our legislators come to their senses, recognize this, and work together to pass some of these real common sense laws.
Couldn't agree more, Dan. And can I put in a shameless plug? In my 6-month political career now, I have learned that one of the critical elements of that is legislative majorities. And that's why, getting Dan into office is critical. That's why the work you all are doing, being here tonight, knocking on doors, making phone calls, that's why that matters, because you need to have legislative majorities and getting Doug elected, yes. But you need to have legislative majorities to pass those critical laws.
Yeah, if we had one more seat in the House. One seat in the House. Joe. No, one more seat in the House. If we're going to talk politics, one more seat in the House passes this law. That's how close it is in Minnesota.
And that Senate file only passed because
one vote in the Senate because the DFL has a 1-vote majority, and because it's a tie in the House, it held there. So.
All right. Well, so I'm going to talk, since we've gotten on this subject, I want to talk a little bit about politics and about compromise, and I want to go back to the auto safety. And I think Minnesota is really instructive. So we do have some substantial auto safety laws in Minnesota, and yet we also have motorcyclists riding without helmets, and that's the result of a compromise, right? So when it comes to ensuring, without negotiating the details of a bill, when it comes to negotiating a compromise, which, to be honest, is probably going to be necessary regardless of who's in the majority, what are the things that absolutely have to be the most important policies or ideas or harm reductions to be included?
In a former life, I did mediation, for couples who are getting divorced and fighting over child custody and things like that, which is, yeah. But there's a phrase in mediation we talk about, which is moving from people from the position they're holding, I want this banned or I want this thing done, to what is your interest? And you talked about this earlier. Our interest is saving lives. Our interest is our kids coming home from school every day. Our interest is safety. And if we can get to a place where our legislators are focused on that interest, instead of some preconceived political notion or goal or idea that they have, we can get stuff done.
I just kind of want to bring up a lot of the compromise that I've heard is a lot of school safety measures. And I just want to bring up that is a touchy thing, because we want to be really, really careful to not make our schools into prisons. It is awful for children. It increases anxiety, and even our current active shooter drills that all students have to do. Not only does it, how is a student supposed to learn after that? But also, most school shooters attended the school, so they know. So you are teaching them how to commit a school shooting. The shooter at Annunciation never entered the building. There is no type of security that would have prevented it. Now that is that's just one experience, but when we talk about school safety, I think we have to be really, really careful about what that actually looks like. And a lot of people in our community like to talk about the Swiss cheese approach and how there's lots of holes, and the more holes we can fill, whether it's an AR ban, a binary trigger ban, but then also like mental health things. There's lots of different layers that hopefully we can come to an agreement on.
Nobody else? Well, good. We're getting near the end, and I want to let everybody have a last word. We talked a lot about finding a way forward, and I will say this again and again and again tonight. I will say it on the campaign trail. I will say it when I get to Congress. The one thing we cannot do is nothing. We have to find a way forward. And so as we wrap up here tonight, based on what you've heard, based on your experience, rather than talk about what you think should be done, talk a little bit about what are the next steps? What do we need to do to have this meaningful conversation about moving away from an argument and getting to a solution? What's one thing that we can do? What's one thing that you can do? What's one thing that elected officials can do? I know majorities matter. I know politics matter. But this is as much a cultural issue as it is a political one. What can we do to advance the conversation in a way that actually gets us somewhere and not to another cul-de-sac that we reached at the end of this last legislative session? Just a softball to end the evening.
I'll give it a stab. I think there's a real disconnect between politics and the public. And I think we need to, politicians in particular, need to really pay attention to bringing people along with them. Not talking to them, not talking at them, not talking around them, not talking above them or below them, but really talking to them. And I think we get a lot of lip service on that, but not a lot of reality on it. So I think in this particular case where we really want to do hard work, this is hard work. I do public health work. It's really hard, right? But I think that means you engage people around you and you ask them for their best ideas and you include them in the solutions. And I think we're really missing a piece of that, especially when we have bills that seem to be loaded with all this ancillary stuff that really didn't even pertain to the original discussion that you were having. So I know that's a political thing, and maybe I'm not a real political person, but I kind of want to cut to the chase and really advise politicians to approach people. Public health is a really honest thing. You have to really talk about what's best for you, what's best for your home, what's best for your kids, what's best for your community, and engage people in those conversations, and then, wow, actually do what they suggest. You know, live up to that. That's what I encourage. I'm glad I'm not a politician.
Well, what I try to do is bring it. I'm not a politician, and I'm not really an expert in much of anything. But what I do know is that these are real lives. These are real kids. These are real people. And just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean that it won't happen to you. It really, I cannot express to you how out of nowhere this was for all of us, and how unexpected it was. And watching parents go through losing their child in such an awful way is not something I would wish upon anybody, let alone have your kid experience it. So I think just remembering that these are real people, and it could be you, it could be your neighbor, it could be your kid. And, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. Let's be the villagers to all of our children. Thank you for coming, and thank you for moving your feet, because we really need to.
Safe storage alone would have saved 135 young people from dying last year. 135. I was looking at the pictures of that text on August 27th. The couple days before that, I was scrolling through my pictures, and I was hanging out with my children at a lake. Today, I saw 20 families in clinic who all placed all their hopes and dreams in their world in these little people, and came and we talked about their future. Kids can't vote. They don't donate. There's no PAC that they're part of. And yet, I'd like to think that so much of what we all want and believe in can't be measured in 2-year or 4-year political cycles. It's about 18-year generational cycles. It's about building a future that we want our kids and grandkids to inherit and to live in. And so when I think about it, I think about, is this policy before us? Is the question before us, does it keep kids healthier, safer? Does it keep families healthier and safer? And I think if we could just shift our politics a little bit into that mindset, then we will be good villagers to our little ones. And I think that's a politics I want to be a part of.
There were 5 hours starting on an early morning in 2014 here at Chaska High School. The school received an email from, I believe, a student threatening or saying they were at the school, coming to the school to commit an act of mass violence. Our oldest was a senior. The band teacher grabbed her and pushed her into the band room here at Chaska High, along with 15 other kids. It was dark. We were terrified. We called the school. There was no news. it was 5 hours. There was no shooter that day. Our daughter, our oldest, she was safe. But even that terror from that day, of that uncertainty, I talked to her about it over the weekend, and as we got ready for as I started thinking about this, I can't imagine the experience that you had. This should not be part of our world.
Well, thank you to all four of you. I want to thank all of you all for being here tonight. I want to point out that we all have two things in common right now. All of us, by being here, have demonstrated that we care deeply about the issue of gun violence and its effect on our communities. But the other thing we have in common, including those of us who are running for office, is that we can't currently do anything about it. But we're coming together to actually try and do something about it. And so even as those of us who are running for office ask for your votes, I ask for you to please use your votes, to use your voice, to use your energy, to use what you know, what you've learned the easy way, and especially the things you've learned the hard way, to help us shift this debate away from a dry constitutional debate about what the founders meant when they wrote a document hundreds of years ago, and focus more on what society looks like now and what we can do to protect one another and still respect one another when it comes to guns and gun violence. I'm grateful every day for the people I've met on this campaign, those who live in the 6th District and those who do not. I have been blown away by the expertise and the depth of care from people like our panel, from people like Joe Brothers, from other people out here that I've met. But I ask all of you tonight to go away from this, not necessarily with some sort of legislative agenda, but with a renewed spirit of remembering that we cannot do nothing. We have to look out for one another. We have to look for our children. We have to look out for our loved ones and other people's loved ones, because as Dan said, there was no shooter there that day, but there could have been. It doesn't have to happen to you to matter to you. And so I ask all of you, please have it matter to you, and let's do what we can to bring this issue to a productive and rightful conclusion. So thank you. Very quickly, I do want to thank a couple of people, well, really just one people who has worked very hard to make this all happen. My good friend Tamara Paulzine, who is the chair of the Carver County DFL. We had the idea of doing this a couple of weeks ago, and I knew that the issue of gun violence and gun policy was going to be a hot button, but I had no idea how hot the button would get by the time that we got here on Monday night. But Tamara has brought us together, has helped us put together this amazing panel, helped us get this room, has managed to get this recorded so that we can share it with others and you can talk about it with others. So please join me in a round of applause for thanking Tamara. And then finally, thank you all. Thanks for being here. Sounds like we're getting a bit of weather, so please travel safely out there. I won't speak for the rest of the folks. I'll be here for a little while afterwards if you'd like to chat. Thank you for being here. 169 days until Election Day. Let's make every single one count. Thank you.